So glad that you're here. So glad that you're here and you're joining us for our next session in our volunteer management series provided by the Michigan Community Service Commission. This one is Igniting Your Recruitment, How to Spark the Word of Mouth Momentum to Recruit Volunteers. So I think this is always a fun topic. I really always like it because for me, it really talks to one of the most pressing things, and that's how you create the connectiveness and engagement amongst others and those that serve with you. So here's some of our objectives today. We're going to talk about why the word of mouth works so well, and we're going to talk about how to activate your ambassadors and how those messages spread and how you can have effective messages that really begin to spark that action. And what are some of those prompts that you can create that do that? And then we're going to talk about engagement strategies that sustain the momentum. How do you like keep it going, keep people feeling good about it? And so, if you get a chance in the chat, I'll do a quick introduction of myself, but in the chat, if you'd like to go ahead and put your name and your organization and where you're from, we'd love to hear from you. And just to let you know, I'm Melissa Sherry. I'm with the Michigan Community Service Commission. I've been here for, it's actually going on 6 years. I can't believe it. But this is one of my most favorite things to do is to do volunteer management training. And I'm joined today by Katie Alexander. Katie, can you say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Katie Alexander and I'm an AmeriCorps that works with Melissa. Today I'm going to be monitoring the chat, so if you have any questions, feel free to put them in there.
Yeah, and you know what, Katie, just so you know, and maybe it's just both of us today, you were a little garbled, your voice, so just FYI. But yeah, if there's something that you need in the chat, she will point it out to us. So why does this word of mouth recruitment work so well? Well, 92% of people trust recommendations from friends and family. You remember those Nielsen TV ratings? That's who came up with that one. And, I think it still rings true, even though lots of things have changed in the past. But, when someone that you trust, that you care about says, hey, you should try this. For example, yesterday I had my hair done and my friend told me about this product and I thought, well, I gotta try it. Her hair always looks great. So I took that step to try it. So those kind of recommendations from those that we care about and those that we value go a long way. That's the number one reason why it works. And then this one is from Volunteer Pro. And I think this is really interesting that volunteers that were recruited through a friend stay 2 to 3 times longer than those that were recruited by an ad that they saw, which is kind of surprising because we put a lot of time into recruitment ads and things like that. But still, the number one way is that connectiveness. And it is also, ironically, the thing that, even after COVID, that we're trying to still get back to is that sense of cohesiveness and connectiveness amongst each other. And then, the other reason why it works so well is that it's free, it's very authentic, and it's scalable to any of your needs. It's so scalable and so easy to be able to use that, like, why wouldn't we? And then, did you know that, if you think about those who are connected to you, those volunteers, if they are, or a stakeholder, whoever it is, if they're advocating on behalf of your organization, they are, and they are putting their neck out and they're saying, hey, you should really come and join us. That is such a sign of trust. They are more likely to be, you're super engaged. They are more likely to be so committed to your organization that you should really tap into them in other ways as well. So, did you know that the likelihood that a volunteer will refer someone they know to your organization typically only happens when they already feel a high level of satisfaction and cohesiveness, and they have a clear purpose and a strong social connection to your organization. So, and I put this in here because I want you to think about that. Who are those people? We'll talk about that later. But really and truly, what this really comes down to is that the you people need to have these things before you can ask them. So we have to do our homework. So if you've been in any of my past sessions, I always talk about the fact that you need to plan. And actually, the doing part of any kind of thing is so minimal compared to the investment in the planning to have those rewards and the payoffs later. So think about that. You need to set them up for success before we ask them to do that. But the more that they're asked to do, the more that they're given these opportunities to really help the organization grow, the more connected they're going to be, and the more likely then that they are going to be to actually want to help you with your recruitment. So let's talk a minute about the psychology of that word of mouth recruitment. So people trust people, not institutions. And I don't know if any of you had heard about this, but just a few years ago, the independent sector issued their Trust in Civic Society report. Does anybody remember that? And what it said is 52% of Americans trust charitable organizations. 52% sounds pretty good, but it has slipped dramatically. And what are the reasons why people are losing trust? I think back in when we talk about the different generations of people. And, our society expectations, our norms, our beliefs, and our values have shifted. I think that some values are still the same. We trust each other, we trust our families, we trust our friends, but we don't necessarily trust institutions. Remember when, I don't know if any of you have been in these positions, but I used to bring my mom to the doctor, and inevitably we would leave, and she would kind of scold me for asking the doctor clarification. Don't you do that? I mean, he's a physician. And, I'm like, what? What? And I'm like, well, it wasn't clear. I mean, you needed to know this. It was important. And so, holding previous generations held certain things and people in high regard. They weren't questioned. And, as things have happened in life, our society questions, younger people question things more. The meddling daughter going to the doctor's appointment meddles more than what she would do. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it's something that we have to think about. And, you might be wondering, what are the reasons for people mistrusting institutions? Well, one, a mismanagement of funds, that is one thing. There's nothing that hurts the credibility of a nonprofit organization more than an embezzlement. And then inappropriate political agendas. And we've seen that. I mean, and then we've seen that lots and lots of times. And people, our political climate today has also truly impacted that as well. So, thinking about that, people trust people, not institutions. And so that's also why you, as the volunteer management professional, that you have such an important role. You're trustworthy. You're an ambassador yourself. But think about that. And then social proof reduces uncertainty. And what is social proof? It's a psychological phenomenon where people are not really sure of what to make of certain things, but it goes back to the people that they trust. We have a friend who's very politically astute. And I have to admit, I'm not always that politically astute, but he always seems to know. And I always find it interesting, but this is social proofing that sometimes I'll ask him about things. I might not always agree with him, but it reduces the uncertainty about what's going to happen and what this means. And I certainly know an example in my own life where that happens, right? And then the next thing is that personal invitations feel meaningful. When even if it doesn't work out just that time, you feel that connectiveness to that person and that it people seem to remember that it makes them feel good. And it also really, when someone has the confidence to ask you, they see something in you, and that it tends to bring people together as well. And then that goes to the next thing about sharing opportunities, make people feel helpful and connected. And when it comes to a current volunteer, a current stakeholder, and a current employee, a board member, that everybody wants that connectiveness. Everybody wants that feeling of affiliation. And so, celebrating that, honoring that, it does so much to increase the engagement of that person and that ownership and that connectiveness in that community of your nonprofit. So let's talk about this. So the realities, and there used to be something over here, I remember, but it's okay. So the realities and some of the challenges that we have to acknowledge is that nationally, volunteerism is declining from about 28% in 2003 to 23% in just, I think it was 2021, 22 that they did the national report on volunteerism and impact. And Michigan itself, years ago, we used to be a leader in volunteerism, and we have moved way down in the rankings on that. Not because we don't have people that care, but I think it's a phenomenon of a lot of different factors from the economy to how, people are, where people are living, how they're living, what are the other factors that have happened. And, really, even things like the 2008 housing crisis and economic problems that Michigan suffered through so much, they had an effect. I mean, that long ago, it still comes back to kind of haunt us a little bit. So, and when volunteerism is not a regular thing in someone's life, it tends to fall away. It's kind of like church. For a lot of people, church has fallen away since COVID, and it's hard to get people back, which is our next session. So join us for that one too. But the competition for attention is higher than ever. We have so many messages coming at us. And do you remember after 9/11, that ticker at the bottom of the TV used to start up? And I remember how much anxiety it used to create in me because I think that's when it happened. And before, the only time that it was used is for a tornado, for something really, really important. And then it was replaced by this constant noise of this ticker, like, oh, what is happening? We were trained, to pay really close attention to that. Well, that is like that message has exploded. And quite honestly, we're probably tired of it. There is something in healthcare called alarm fatigue. When you hear that ding, 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 some of those people don't even hear it anymore. And that's what it is. It's alarm fatigue. Now, if we're not in healthcare, we may not ever hear those things, or so it isn't, it's alarming to us. But if you had to do a 12-hour shift and you were hearing those alarms, yeah, it makes sense. It's the same thing. There's so much competition for our attentions. And then here's another thing. Organizations rely heavily on digital outreach. We do it. Every organization I've ever associated with, their marketing is always digital. But guess what? People respond most to personal invitations. It goes back to my friend telling me about a hair product. It makes sense. It's that connection. So, did you know that Organizations estimate that 20 to 40% of their new volunteers now come from referrals, personal referrals. So if 20 to 40% of them are coming from personal referrals, we know two things. One, we're not doing it enough. No one has as many volunteers as they probably need. But we also have to acknowledge that, it does vary widely by the mission and the community size. But we also know that those that we recruit and we engage from those personal referrals make a big difference. So who are your messengers? Well, here's just a quick list, but I bet if you delve deeper, you would find even more ways to do this. So, current volunteers, board members, staff members, partner organizations, donors, community influencers, and past volunteers. That's just a kind of a simple list. But what about, like suppliers? What about when you talk to donors? Take it a step further. How can you make this a win-win for organizations? What about, when they said suppliers, it could be a local supplier, it could be a local partner, it could be, it could be a funder for that matter. But, delving deeper into these, I think, is a good idea. And one of the ways that I think that's always a good idea is um, to be able to hold like a round table. I don't know if you've ever done this before, but we've done this. So, how do you tap into those new circles? This is like the other thing about word of mouth recruitment. Sometimes we are not the ones who have the impact and the influence in a community, but you want a volunteer uh, makeup, the workforce makeup to be reflective of the communities that we serve. But sometimes we just don't have those connections, and that's okay because we're the facilitators. So, holding a recruitment roundtable, talking about what your needs are, and start plotting out who knows who, how do we influence, how do we get to those areas, how do we map out the talent that we need, and then it can spark and resonate with people who are already engaged. I've done this with volunteers, and it really has worked out well. We got into some very large companies, and this person had really the best connections, and it was something that I hadn't expected. The other thing is I talked to lots of people who were retired teachers. Retired teachers hang out with each other. And it's probably because it's been so tough for them over the years, and that's their network of how they've kept it together and they've kept each other going. But it's a really supportive thing. Nurses are the same way. And so you think about that. And then women's professional groups, and I know I'm keep talking about things that are not always, but sometimes predominantly women. Although I'm thinking about it, the teachers in my life are men, and I have nurses in my life that are both women and men. So it's about like how do you tap into where those groups are. I also used to work very closely with um, some of our partners that were like um, there was like a Hispanic heritage group, and they would do events and things like that, and they would allow us to come in and do expos and talk to their members and their family members. And how we did it was that would bring people who were volunteers that would be really excited about volunteering, and they would come in and they would talk about their experience. I very rarely ever talked except to introduce them. It was perfect. So, mapping out what your talent needs are, and then who has the skills to do that, and who knows those people, and how do you tap into those? Identifying, like I said, populations, career paths, skills needed, and who knows these people to do the ask. identify ways to share volunteers with sister organizations. Um, we would do this thing over National Volunteer Week where we would come together with a bunch of different organizations and we would talk about how we could recruit together and how we could share resources. And we did a recruitment message. But what we did is we went to our people and we shared the recruitment message. So even if my organization might not be the perfect one for someone they know, hey, they have an opportunity to help another organization recruit. There has to be a lot of trust in that. And, I can understand the hesitancy. We don't want to lose our volunteers by, telling them to go somewhere else. I never lost anyone that way. And that was because they had those personal connections to me. But we would talk about the importance of it. And like one of those sister organizations, I was in healthcare, Ellie's Place, which is a place for grieving children who have lost someone. Uh, we would do some things with them to help promote, and they would, it just kind of a back and forth. Same thing with the Ronald McDonald House. I'd promote things that they needed, and there was very much an alignment there. And people seem to be very happy to do that. Again, I never lost anyone, but it made them feel like a wider connection to things too. And maybe they also didn't feel like Ellie's Place, that kind of volunteering was something they could do, but they could contribute in a way. And same thing with the Ronald McDonald House. So identify fun places to volunteer. We used to go to the Women's Expo. I don't know if you have these, but they used to do, it was a big thing at the Lansing Center. And I would get all my volunteers together and I never had a trouble, covering shifts. I had 10 volunteers there and we would just, give out little things. We get people to sign up and then boom, on Monday, we would be following up with those people. And they made the connection to a volunteer. They saw how fun it was for a volunteer to be volunteering and telling their story. And there was something that just resonated with them. And we would get 20, 30 volunteers from that. So for some organizations, 20 or 30 volunteers might even double what you have. I'm not saying for everybody, but it was a nice bump. And we were able to bring them in and connect them with people. So they had people that were, helping with connections and feeling like they belonged right away. And it worked really well. So, court your community influencers. We had this lady in Lansing. She's since passed, but she was always known for her big bright hats. She owned a flower shop. And I did not know her personally, but I knew lots of people that knew her. And she knew our organization. And so her name was Lucille. And Lucille could just get other people to do stuff. And so she was an older lady, but she came into contact with lots of people, just like a institutional knowledge of how to do stuff that this lady was. And then there was this lady back in the history of our little hospital. Her name was Gladys Sprinkle. That was also Gladys Sprinkle. She was like the OG of a community influencer. She started so many things and she would come and tell people about volunteering at the hospital. And, I think she was like everywhere. She was literally a professional volunteer, but she was amazing. And I never met her, but her legacy honestly lived on for like so many years. I mean, of people she brought into the organization who stayed and remembered her. They always had some funny stories about her because as she got older, she would like literally probably fall asleep, I think is what the story was. But she would always be connecting with people and I love that lady. And like I said, I've never met her, but she was pretty incredible. So court those community influencers. And nowadays, what's really funny is that community influencers are different. They're different people. Um, I would also say connect with your elected officials. You know, our legislative people, the people that you vote for, the people who represent you at our state capitol, they do work for you. And they come across a lot of people. They'd like to come across more people. But you know, they'd also like to be connected with great causes. And you are a great cause. You are important. You are important to the fabric of your community, of the very people that they seek to improve their lives. You are improving their lives. You are influencing their lives. You have a seat there. Go talk to them. Ask them. We have some places across the state that, believe it or not, there's not a lot of volunteering happening. And they all have elected officials. We should be knocking on their doors. We should be talking to them about the importance of volunteerism. We should be asking them to go out and recruit people for us. We also should talk about those people that make a real difference in the lives of everyday citizens. Those are our people of faith, our faith leaders, our physicians, our nurse practitioners, our psychologists, all those people. I know that there's people that are sometimes not in the best place to do it, but sometimes all they need is connectiveness. And I can tell you, we used to, when I was in healthcare, I worked with a group who started a physician recognition and event and a program. And, you know, I kind of was scratching my head like, why am I doing this? But when I finally got the aha moment was when those physicians got to know the impact of what we were doing. And then they were starting to tell people about us. I was literally, this is kind of a funny story, but um, I was in for my annual, OBGYN appointment, and I'm just waiting, got my little robe on, and I'm just waiting for the person to come in, and I look over and they've got a bulletin board over here about things that are happening. And one of the things that they had up there was our volunteer ad. And I just had to start laughing because I'm like, it's the last place I thought I was going to see this. But honestly, I mean, I never forgot that. And really, what it was it connected to them. We were giving tours of the mother baby. We were helping out with train people to do classes for like the little sibs and things like that. And so they were talking about that, and I just absolutely loved it. So court your community influencers and think deep about who they are. And then create mutually beneficial pipelines of talent. One of the times that we did this, when we had our little round table, we connected with someone whose family goes way, way back with an institution that we're all probably familiar with. It was auto owners. And lovely, lovely organization, lovely people. And she said, you know what? Let's go talk to them. And so she went and I mean, she knows everybody who's in charge over there. And she went and she talked to them about the impact of what this could do to get their employees involved. They want community involvement, but you can't just expect it to happen. You have to give people a pipeline to do that. So it became professional development. It became a way for them to connect with their community and have, it really resonated with what their employees were doing, what we could do with them. And then we would work with them to let them know, who's doing this. And then they get recognized. And that was so incredibly impactful. And we started taking that same model, just kind of, rinse and recycle. And we started doing that with other local companies and entities across our region. And for smaller companies, like the big ones like GM, who are certainly a huge partner with the Michigan Community Service Commission, they are kind of a giant of themselves. I mean, they have people that do this. But smaller companies, mom and pop, 50 employees or less, they don't necessarily have the professionals that can do that engagement. And so helping to get a leg in the door, a connection with them, and thinking deep about your circle of influence, you have the ability to be able to set that those kind of systems up. I would do that for a lot of those smaller companies and really understood what their return on investment was. For a lot of them, we were able to track if those people, if they were able to retain those people and how those employees connected their volunteer work with us to the larger impact of their organization. The other thing is, as we got better at this, and I'm not saying I was always great at it, but as I got better at it, what I realized was that businesses always do this for a dollar bottom line. And so, what is it that we can give their employees that they can't? It might be professional development, it might be learning a new skill, it might be connections, it might be understanding a topic, things like that. So those were all things that we had developed into. But think about it in terms of, your circle of influence. Get people around the table and talking about this. It's really it's going to be incredible when you find out how big your reach is. So did you know, messages that spread quickly, they typically evoke emotion, a high emotional content that blends moral and emotional language are more likely shared via social media. And I say this because we do want people to be able to easily share it. And sometimes their influence in their circle it does include social media. So think about that, and I always think about the things that get people. One of and I didn't even do this intentionally, but I thought it was just cute. We had therapy dogs at a place where I worked, and there was a really cute dog, and his brother, who looked just like him, got recruited to also be a therapy dog at the organization, and so we were launching our recruitment drive, and we would do this fall recruitment drive with like a football theme, and like we would hold a tailgate and we would invite people, and it was a cool thing to do. But we said, hey, even our therapy dogs recruit their friends and family, and this is so and so and so and so. And it ended up being, it was kind of cute and a little cheeky, and it ended up being the organization's most commented, popular social media post they've ever had. And you know what? It worked. I mean, they do love dogs, and they came in and people responded. We got new volunteers that had nothing to do with dogs. And so, and then we had a few new dogs as well. But and then thinking about like some of those inspirational notes, this isn't necessarily a recruitment, but it's something that, drives that relates to that vulnerability and relatability. But I bet you remember these. You are enough. Remember that slogan? I still see signs around that people put in front of their houses. And it demonstrates an action and a solution. It's it it evokes that. You really do think about it. You are enough. You matter. Um, do you remember how I don't know if this was just kind of a local thing or but people were putting these in the front of their yard on those little yard signs. Has anyone ever thought about doing that with a recruitment message, asking your volunteers, hey, would you put out a sign? I volunteer at so and so, ask me about it. I think that would be pretty cool myself. I haven't ever seen that one, but um, it's a relatively low cost way to recruit volunteers, and it also kind of sparks that connection. I will say that I live in a very walkable neighborhood, and I used to have a neighbor next door. And he used to decide, he was kind of a busybody, but he used to decide, who needed more to do. And he used to talk to them about me being the director of volunteer services and that they ought to just go talk to me. Well, sometimes they really did come and knock on my door. And so, I mean, he really did, he really did help me out a lot. He really recruited a lot of volunteers, and they were all from the neighborhood too. So, who should you expect or hope will be a great word of mouth ambassador? So these are just some ideas here, but I think that these do really ring true. It's a person who's been reliable and consistent. It's not your brand new volunteer or your volunteer you're trying to re-engage. And when we say past volunteers, what I mean is the good ones, the ones that were that you really did have a connection with, and they just can't for right now. They've moved, they have gotten a new job, something like that. I mean, I had a lady who in 2008, she and her husband experienced terrible financial problems. He got a job out in California. They were moving to a houseboat in near San Francisco because that's where his job was. And that was the kind of house they could afford. I thought that was just incredible. But you know what? She told her friends about her needing to leave the community. And one of the things that she was so sad about was that her role at our organization, and she hoped that her friends, that someone would pick up the slack for her because those people needed her. And I thought that was so powerful, and it did actually work. We met some lovely people. She was a lovely person. They were lovely people. And we got a couple neighbors. We got, it was kind of a cool thing. So a reliable, consistent person. Those people who are easily able to make connections between the needs and the likely fit. You want people not just blind volunteering, but you want them to be able to make that connection. So they have to have a good amount of familiarity. People with connections, those business people, influencers, people that are motivated by affiliation, those with deep roots in the community, those Lucille's from the flower shop. Yeah. And then clear understanding of the mission and the messaging. Like one of the things that in most of the organizations that I've worked with, you cannot proselytize. And, one time that did happen that somebody came in and they said, well, I'm here to save people's souls. And I mean, how lovely, but that is not, it's not consistent with our mission. And so, we had to help them find another place to volunteer. But that's okay. So that understanding of the mission and the message of what you need. Committed to the cause and that sense of belonging. They're not going to do it unless they belong. And so that they're creative and proactive. That's why I'm telling you, those teachers were so good. They are good at, following up. They're good at consistency. They're good at those kind of things. And you know what? People have to be asked. You have to ask them to do this. That is the thing that we forget the most, that we just don't ask people what we want them to do. We offer it in a weird way, but we have to directly ask them. We need volunteers. Will you help me? Will you help me? Will you come to this? And we will work together to do this. So, what do they need? What do your ambassadors, your influencers need? To confidently share their message, they need a simple explanation of what you do. So, how can you make it simple? They need a clear description of the volunteer role. And it isn't the whole position description. That's to make sure that we keep people on track after we have recruited them. But what is the role? What is it that you're going to do? And a short, compelling ask and easy ways to share. And we need to set those easy ways up. So, crafting a message that spreads. There's this little formula that's used, a three-part volunteer invitation, why it matters, what the role is, and how can someone get involved. So here's an example. I've mentored Chloe for 2 years, and it's been so rewarding for me. But the real impact has been having a front row seat to seeing this amazing person grow into a promising young adult. I think you'd be a great mentor to a young person, and I'd like to have coffee with you so you could learn more. I mean, you'd probably massage that message. This wouldn't be how you would do it, but if you sent a note to someone that you cared about or that you worked with, it might really resonate. It's flexible, meaningful work. You want me to send a meeting invite so we can talk about it more. So in your own words, but kind of just a simple thing like that. It's impactful. It talks about, how that happens. It doesn't go into the detail of, you only have to volunteer once a month, or it's not selling them on the negatives, it's selling them on the promise. So this formula, clear message, right messenger, plus simple action equals momentum. This is another formula. So here's a couple other tips. Keeping it very short. Messages under 20 seconds are shared 4 times more often, and that's from the Marketing Science Institute. So you can put a seal on that. But aim for one sentence about the mission, one sentence about the role, and one sentence about how to join. Very, very simple. And sometimes we make it so much harder than it has to be, and we make it longer than it has to be. I've been guilty of that myself. So here's some prompts that spark sharing. Give them some ready-made prompts, like invite one friend to join you next month. Share your volunteer link or your social media today. And so invite them to something. Share your link on social media, have a QR code, give them something for social media, tell someone why you volunteered, and forward an opportunity to 3 people and or talk to 3 people So, I also like these social media prompts. These are like, you could do some copy and paste text. I volunteer with blank because I care about our community, or I care about this and I need you to join me. It could be melded into whatever you want, but make it as simple and easy as possible. Look for meaningful ways to help. We need volunteers. And, again, putting that personal spin on it, I think makes it more impactful. Another thing that I've seen done, and I really always like this, are these ambassador cards. Creating a small card that volunteers could hand out in their networks. I would include a QR code to your online application, a short description, contact information, and just asking me about volunteering. And it's the same thing as like the sign in front of your house. And I think people would do that. They put signs for a roofer in front of people's houses. They'd certainly probably put something that they really care, they're invested in front of their homes. So make sharing easy. Provide the templates, provide the scripts, provide the graphics, provide the talking points, and simple links, I'm sorry. So just make it as easy as possible. Give it to them in every possible way that they could possibly use it. So some other ways that after this gets going, and what I've learned is that you have to keep the momentum going. When I first started doing more of this word of mouth recruitment, we did a volunteer drive, and we did it in the fall. And like I said, it was connected to our tailgate that we did. Um, Not everybody has that ability to do a tailgate, but you know what? Why not just make your own tailgate? I mean, we did crazy things like we did a volunteer car wash one time, and it was the craziest thing. We were just kidding, and then it kind of spurred the momentum. But people still remember us washing their cars and giving out pizza. Why not in your parking lot have a tailgate and they could bring friends and you could encourage them to, people bring dishes, have some food there, whatever, have a TV, have a screen, whatever. But build that momentum of that relationship and that community and things like that. So I would also do things about monthly volunteer spotlights. This is where the volunteer of the month thing, I was sort of opposed to it when our volunteers talked about it because I didn't want to just call out one volunteer, but it was so impactful. And what it would always include on that, if you want to learn more about volunteering, here's how. And we would have people call us, we would have people follow up with that person. So prepare that person because people in their circle are going to recognize them for this. It was a big deal. And it was really, it was a highlight. I mean, it really was a cool thing. And we were able to push this out in so many places, and it gave us reason. The news would pick it up and give us highlights about, these people volunteering, and you could volunteer too. It really did resonate. And those volunteers were telling their story. And because of that, how that resonated with people, that's why people came in to volunteer afterwards. So recognition for those ambassadors. How do you recognize them? I would talk about them in the newsletter. I would say, hey, this is how they know each other. Welcome, blah, blah, blah. I would make it a big deal. Those bring a friend events. I love bring a friend events. We would do it for all kinds of things. We would do it for National Volunteer Week. We would have a carnival. I've done that before. We've done it for fundraisers. We've done it for all sorts of things. And I can tell you, it always resulted in new volunteers. So referral challenges, who could refer the most volunteers and, have them get started. And then there would be a prize at the end. We'd end up doing more prizes than I ever promised in the beginning, but it was a cool thing. And then at one point, I actually had some companies that would get on the bandwagon and help with this. They would do like a free oil change for somebody who referred volunteers. It was like a board member did it. There was I think it was a car wash. I mean, it was some goofy things like that, and people just loved it. So we would also do ambassador newsletters too. How can you give this newsletter to other people? How can you give something that could be put in different newsletters so that you're making kind of like a constant presence? It was low cost, cheap, easy, just kind of updated it. And it would, I would kind of come up with a template of them for the year, and we would just kind of work through those. It was easy peasy, but it was effective. So volunteers are 5 times more likely to bring a friend to a low pressure event. So that's why I said like the carnival thing, the open house, the coffee chat, and orientation seems a little more intense, but like a project day as well. So, and whenever you have those organizations, the companies that want to do a team building, at your organization. I know sometimes that's not always the best thing to have. How many times can that wall get painted? But, following up with those people and, making a connection with them, I think is always a great way. We do that with those National Days of Service. I'm always, bugging people. How did you follow up with people? How did you re-recruit them? And, how did you make those connections? And having your volunteers do that, I think is great too. And don't forget the power of storytelling. And people share stories, not statistics. So, why they volunteered, who they helped, that story about Chloe, the impact that they've seen, how it changed them. Those are the things that kind of always drove things, in my opinion. Statistics are good. It hits home with a lot of people, but the stories are the things that you remember. I was an English major. I do not remember numbers. I mean, you could ask me any number, like what was the percentage of this, even in my own presentation, and I don't trust that I'm going to remember that. But if I heard some story, I always remember that about somebody. So storytelling fuels sharing. And so, if you are going to use statistics, though, every volunteer hour saves nonprofits an average of $33.49 in labor. If you need to use statistics, use impactful ones. Volunteers contribute over 200 billion to the economy nationally. Your organization supported blank families last year thanks to our volunteers. Uh, I'm not saying that statistics aren't important. There's some people it's very important to them. But for my memory, what I remember is always the stories. So build a culture of an invitation. Who else should know about this? And, don't think of it as like I'm piling on one more thing or I'm embarrassed. You're giving someone the opportunity to do something really cool to change people's lives, just like we do. So, who would you bring in with you the next time? Who do you think should know about this? Who in your network might enjoy this work? And so constantly asking those things, making it a normal part of your rounding, your connecting with others, especially even at special milestones. If they've hit a 1 year mark, if they've hit a 2 year mark, a 5 year mark, whatever it is, 100 hours, or whatever it is, find ways to normalize that, building a culture of an invitation. And then think about this. We all know this as a volunteer professional leader. There's common barriers. So you got to remove those barriers. You remove the time. People say time, uncertainty, fear of commitment, not knowing what to expect. Really, it boils down to they don't know. They need more information. Think about these barriers when you hear this as I need more information, not I don't have time. You would make time. I think I don't have enough time, but I have time for all the things I want to do. And if this resonated with me and I was asked to do it, I would do it. So provide so what you do need to do, the antithesis of those barriers are clear expectations, flexible roles, short-term options, and friendly onboarding processes. All these things are the things that you need to have before and anticipate them and just clear it off the table before you ever meet with that person. That's part of a big role of what we do is that we're clearing those barriers away. Oops. And so let's talk about just kind of putting this all together. I presented all kinds of ideas to you, and you're probably like, oh my gosh. So if you remember anything, you have to equip your ambassadors. You can go back and look at these things. You can look at the ideas. Maybe there were one or two that you pulled out of this that you're thinking, I could try that. And you have to work on simplifying your message. So very important. 20 seconds. And I gave you a couple of formulas. How do you use those? Make it easy to share. Set them up for success. Give them just a QR code, give them whatever it is. Celebrate those referrals. Make a big deal out of it. It helps kind of normalizing it, and people see that, and then they think, oh, I want to be a part of that. And then keep engagement high. Talk about celebrations and recognition and just keep it going. And what it's going to do is it's going to fuel more engagement. And you're going to be able to, believe it or not, create a recruitment machine, which all of us need. I know that because there's fewer of us that are even volunteering out there in the world these days. So, if you're going to do anything after this and you're like thinking about how do I do this, identify your top ambassadors. I'm sure as we've talked, you probably thought about some Lucille, some Gladys Sprinkles in your life. Hopefully they're all with you and you know who they are. And maybe you're going to do something different, like you're going to task your elected officials to help you. Create your message templates as you don't go out to them until you have these, but make it easy for them to share these. And then launch a simple referral prompt. Do it with, a few of your trusted volunteers. Get their feedback. Ask them how it was. Really bring them into this. And then do something low stress, low commitment, bring a friend event. And then always track and celebrate your wins. We did a number of things that we unfortunately never tracked before, and we put a lot of money into it, and it really never got us anywhere. But I'm telling you, the simplest things were always tended to be the low cost, and they usually yielded the most wins for us. So think about that. And that really does wrap up my session. I'm going to stop my sharing, but I want to put this out here. Here's my email. Feel free to follow up with me. And I'm going to stop the sharing and I'm going to stop the recording so that if you have questions, you can ask. Okay. All right. Well, are there any questions, thoughts, feedback that you'd like to have? Anything that really resonates with you? And Patty, I will see you next week too. Well, great. Well, I know it's hard when we've got so many people here, but I want to say thank you for joining us today. And don't forget to join us next week. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.